Welcome, seekers of the unknown, and thank you for tuning in to the great abyss where the eldritch horrors of Lovecraft come to life. Today we're diving into a fascinating story, possibly one of the most intriguing I've come across recently. The story is called The Haunter of the Dark by Howard Phillips Lovecraft. But this tale has something peculiar right from the beginning. It features a dedication to one of Lovecraft's friends, which I'd like to read to you to convey the significance it holds. The dedication reads, to Robert Bloch. I have seen the universe of shadows open, where black planets drift aimlessly, where they spin in their unknown horror, without order, without light, without name. Nemesis. Powerful words indeed, dedicated to Robert Bloch. This is because The Haunter of the Dark is a direct continuation of The Shambler from the Stars, written by Robert Bloch. As you may recall, a few days ago on this channel, we explored The Shambler from the Stars, in which Robert Bloch depicted an unnamed writer contacting a friend in Providence, who turns out to be Lovecraft himself in fictional form. The story involves a mysterious book that invokes something deadly, taking the life of the writer's friend. The protagonist narrowly escapes, believing he was doomed, only to embark on an adventure that unfolds in The Haunter of the Dark. What happens in the end is something you won't easily predict. Now, let's delve into The Haunter of the Dark. The story begins with someone investigating the death of a man named Robert Blake, a famous writer found dead by the open window of his home. Blake's journal entries describe his second visit to Providence, the first being to seek a friend's help, translating a mysterious Latin book. His notes detail how he was compelled to burn his friend's house, with the friend inside, after the latter had died in a gruesome manner. Some people believe there's something hidden and malevolent tied to Blake's death. Many even give credence to the horrors described in his journal, suggesting they are real and merely waiting to be awakened. However, the investigator analyzing Blake's death is a scientist, someone who dismisses such notions and attributes Blake's demise to madness. The diary recounts events following Blake's departure from Providence and his eventual return, culminating in his horrific death. Right up to the final moment, his diary chronicles his ordeal. The story unfolds with young Robert Blake arriving in Providence. He rents a house on Federal Hill, a spacious home he uses as a studio. During his time there, he writes numerous stories and paints eerie scenes of alien landscapes and otherworldly beings. His inspiration often comes as he gazes out of his window, his eyes drawn to the horizon. A foggy landscape full of mystery spreads before him, and in the distance, he always notices one thing: a peculiar church. The church's unique tower, perched atop a hill, fascinates him. Its jet-black spire stands out sharply against the background, and flocks of birds seem to avoid it. Its Gothic architecture and dilapidated state only add to its spectral allure, compelling Blake to uncover its secrets, hoping to fuel his creative endeavors. Blake observes that the church's windows are perpetually dark, leading him to conclude it is abandoned. One day, driven by curiosity, he ventures through the shadowy streets of Providence to reach this mysterious church. Upon finding it, he discovers the structure in an advanced state of ruin. A deep sense of desolation hangs over the place. A guard warns him that Italian priests avoid the church at all costs, believing it to be a dwelling of immense, monstrous evil trapped within. A sect, he explains, once inhabited the site, summoning beings from the unfathomable abysses of the night. A priest eventually used light to trap these entities and exorcise the area. After the guard leaves, Blake remains, drawn to the decrepit church. He cautiously approaches the sealed doors, but finds them locked. Determined, he descends through a skylight into a dusty basement filled with old barrels and furniture. Climbing a perilous staircase, he reaches an archway and wanders into the church's corridors, as though pulled by an unseen magnetic force. It draws him toward the deepest parts of the church. The light filtering through the stained glass windows barely illuminates his path, but Blake notices that the windows bear occult symbols. The depictions of saints seem painted with malice, and Christian crosses have been replaced by Egyptian ankhs. Blake stumbles upon a pile of decaying books on a decrepit desk. Among them, he recognizes forbidden tomes such as the Necronomicon, the Book of Ibon, the infamous Cultus de Ghoul, and De Vermis Mysteries. He also finds other grim works like the Liber Ivonis and cryptical manuscripts. The discovery leaves no doubt in his mind. This place, rumored to be cursed, had indeed been a focus of great evil. Among the papers, Blake finds cryptic notes containing astronomical symbols of planets, stars, and the zodiac, arranged as though forming coded phrases. He takes them, intending to study them later. Continuing his exploration, he ascends the spire he had often seen from his window. At its peak, instead of a traditional church bell, he finds a large, elongated room. The space appears modified, its expansive interior reinforced with opaque screens over the windows to block out light. In the center stands a 1.5-meter-high column, adorned with countless enigmatic symbols resembling hieroglyphs. Atop it, resting like an altar, lies a metallic, asymmetrical box with its lid ajar. Inside, covered in dust, is an ovoid object about 10 centimeters in size. Around the central column, Blake found 7 colossal plaster statues, painted black and almost completely destroyed. These statues were eerily identical to the Moai of Easter Island. The open box atop the column was yellow, covered in bas-reliefs depicting monstrous creatures that seemed to hail from another planet. The ovoid object inside was a black polyhedron with red striations, supported at the base of the box by 7 conduits. When Blake picked it up and wiped it clean, it appeared to be a rare mineral, reflective and polished like a mirror. Peering into the object, Blake felt the void of cosmic darkness engulf his very being. As he looked around, his attention was drawn to something out of place on the floor, a human skeleton. It seemed to have been lying there for countless years. Searching through its belongings, Blake found a press pass identifying the long-deceased individual as a journalist from the now-defunct Providence Telegram. An identification card revealed the name Edwin M. Lillibridge. Among the remains, Blake also found a notebook filled with cryptic notes. The notes revealed a chilling story. In May 1844, an archaeologist named Enoch Bowen returned from Egypt and purchased the church. He introduced sermons about the wisdom of the stars. And soon after, strange disappearances began, coinciding with blood sacrifices. The notes mentioned the Shining Trapezohedron, an artifact central to these rituals. A priest named O'Malley spoke of a demon-worshipping cult that used a box unearthed in Egyptian ruins to summon a being that could not bear the light. This artifact, the trapezohedron, could reveal the cosmos and other worlds, while the haunter of the dark, the entity it invoked, would impart forbidden secrets. Blake gathered the journalist's notes, fully convinced now of the cursed nature of the church. Lillibridge had entered the church 50 years earlier, seeking a sensational story, only to meet his doom. Returning his gaze to the polyhedron, Blake was overwhelmed by visions. He saw hooded figures vastly different from humans, endless deserts lined with monoliths in perfect alignment, and a massive abyss inhabited by immense, unconscious presences. As he felt himself suffocating under the weight of the visions, Blake dropped the stone. A chilling realization washed over him. Something had been watching him, not from the stone, but through it. The oppressive sense of being observed filled him with dread. He heard a faint white noise and decided to place the stone back in the metal box. However, he noticed that the stone emitted a faint, eerie glow as night fell. Blake left the church and returned home, shaken. Over the following days, he dedicated himself to deciphering the cryptic astronomical symbols he had found in the notes. After months of study, he finally unraveled their meaning. The text described a being known as the Haunter of the Dark, awakened when someone gazed into the Shining Trapezohedron. This omniscient entity demanded monstrous sacrifices, while light served as its only barrier. The text recounted how the stone had been carved during the enigmatic Yuggoth era, long before the Great Old Ones brought it to Earth. It was placed in its peculiar box by crinoid-like beings in Antarctica, who safeguarded it until their civilization perished. The artifact was then claimed by the Serpent Men of Valusia, eventually discovered by humans millions of years later. It traveled through Atlantis, sinking with the continent, before resurfacing in Egypt. There, the pharaoh Neferka built a windowless temple to house the stone. His crimes and atrocities were so horrific that his name was erased from Egyptian history forever. As days passed, rumors began spreading through the city. People reported hearing loud, strange noises emanating from the church. Blake knew the entity he had inadvertently awakened was growing stronger in the darkness. The only thing keeping it confined was the light illuminating the streets around the church. On July 17th, an article in the Providence Journal detailed the growing fear among the townspeople over the disturbances at the church. The situation turned dire that night when a storm caused a blackout, plunging the entire town into darkness for an hour. Residents, knowing the evil within the church could escape, described hearing the sound of shattering glass as if something had broken free. The haunter, confined to the shadows, roamed the limits of the darkness. Terrified, the townspeople lit candles and placed lights around the church, desperate to keep the entity trapped within. Some journalists later entered the church to debunk the rumors, claiming to find nothing. Meanwhile, Blake grew increasingly anxious. The connection he had developed with the entity terrified him, and he feared that another blackout would allow the haunter to fully escape. One night, Blake awoke suddenly, fully dressed and walking toward the church, as though some unseen force was pulling him to the haunter in the darkness. In his dreams, the haunter was growing stronger. To prevent himself from sleepwalking to the church, Blake started tying his ankles to the bed every night. But one fateful night, he woke to find himself inside the church, standing in the room where he had first discovered the stone, right in front of the column adorned with strange symbols. As he stood there, vivid mental images overwhelmed him. Visions of an abyss, one that lay at the edge of the universe. At its center was a blind, mindless god, Azathoth, ruler of all things. When he returned home, Blake realized the situation had become dire and dangerously unsustainable. His encounters with the haunter were pushing him to the edge. On the stormy night of August 8th, Blake's fear consumed him. Lightning illuminated the dark sky as he descended into madness. In his terror, he began writing incoherent phrases in his diary. "The light must not go out. It knows where I am. I must destroy it. It's calling me." At 2:12 a.m., the power grid across the town failed. Many townspeople had gathered in the streets, carrying candles and standing vigil near the cursed church. Yet a powerful wind swept down from the spire, extinguishing every flame, plunging the town into absolute darkness. At 2:36 a.m., dozens of witnesses, including police officers, reported hearing loud crashes and an overpowering stench emanating from the church. Moments later, part of the spire collapsed, breaking into pieces on the ground. From the hole left behind, a shadowy floating entity emerged, darker than the night itself, a smoky form that streaked through the sky, heading east across Providence at an unnatural speed. By morning, when the power was restored, Blake was found dead. He was seated in a chair by his window, staring toward the church. The official cause of death was recorded as a lightning strike, but the truth was far more terrifying. Blake had died of shock after facing the haunter of the dark. Blake's diary, filled with cryptic notes and accounts of his discoveries in the church, was later studied by Dr. Dexter. Convinced of the truth in Blake's words, Dexter retrieved the ovoid stone, placed it back into the metal box, and threw it into the depths of the Narragansett River. Before concluding, here are the haunting final words from Blake's diary. "I am Robert Harrison Blake, East Knapp Street 620, Milwaukee, Wisconsin. I am of this planet. Azathoth, have mercy. The lightning doesn't stop, it's horrible. I can see everything now, with a sense beyond sight. Light is darkness, and darkness is light. Those people on the hill, their candles, their charms, their priests. I'm losing my sense of distance. Far is near, near is far. There is no light, no crystal. I see the spire, the tower, the window. Sounds. Roderick Usher. Am I mad, or am I becoming? It stirs, it flutters in the tower. We are one. I want to leave. I must leave and unify my forces. It knows where I am. I am Robert Blake, but I see the tower in the darkness. There is a horrible smell. My senses have transformed. The tower boards burst open and something emerges. The ink, I see it coming. A hellish wind. A titanic shadow. Black wings. Joxathoth, save me. Your burning three-lobed eye." Conclusion. The Haunter of the Dark is a story that blends the fear of the unknown with a warning about the dangers of seeking forbidden knowledge. Through Blake, Lovecraft shows us how curiosity can lead to the discovery of truths that the human mind cannot handle. The Shining Trapezohedron symbolizes this forbidden knowledge, capable of destroying both body and mind. The struggle between light and darkness in the story is more than just symbolism. It reflects how fragile our defenses against chaos truly are. Light is not an absolute refuge, but a temporary barrier that can fail, leaving us vulnerable to the horrors that lurk in the shadows. At its core, this story is not just meant to scare, but to make us think about our own vulnerability. Lovecraft reminds us that the universe is vast, strange, and indifferent, and that sometimes there are things better left unknown. It's a tale that forces us to stare into the abyss, leaving us with a profound sense of respect, fear, and awe for the mysteries of existence. This concludes The Haunter of the Dark, the direct continuation of the Shambler from the stars. However, the story doesn't end here. After Lovecraft's death, Robert Bloch wrote a third installment, The Shadow from the Steeple, paying homage to his friend and expanding the chilling narrative. Thank you for joining me today. Until tomorrow, keep your lights on. You never know. The Haunter might be watching. Take care and good night.